Jessica Martinez, a 29-year-old marketing coordinator for a pharmaceutical company in Tampa, Florida, believed she had found her perfect match when she married David Walsh in a beachfront ceremony at Clearwater Beach on June 15, 2024. The wedding, attended by 150 guests, represented the culmination of an 18-month courtship that had begun when they met at a professional networking event in downtown Tampa. David, 34 years old, worked as a regional sales director for a medical equipment company, earning approximately $78,000 annually, plus commissions that often added another $20,000 to his income. His frequent business travel throughout Florida and neighboring states had initially concerned Jessica, but his explanations about client meetings and trade shows seemed reasonable given his profession. The couple purchased a 3-bedroom townhouse in South Tampa's West Shore district, using Jessica's savings for the down payment, while David handled the mortgage payments and utilities. Their combined income provided a comfortable lifestyle, and they had begun discussing plans to start a family within the next 2 years. Jessica's friends and family had embraced David enthusiastically, viewing him as stable, ambitious, and devoted to Jessica's happiness. During their engagement, David had been attentive and romantic, frequently surprising Jessica with flowers, weekend getaways, and thoughtful gestures that reinforced her belief that she had chosen the right partner. However, David Walsh had concealed a critical aspect of his personal history from Jessica throughout their relationship. For the previous 6 years, he had been in an on-and-off relationship with Stephanie Collins, a 31-year-old single mother who lived in Lakeland, approximately 45 minutes from Tampa. Stephanie worked as a dental hygienist and was raising 2 children fathered by David, 5-year-old Marcus and 3-year-old Isabella. David provided irregular financial support for the children and maintained sporadic contact with Stephanie, visiting when his work travel brought him to the Lakeland area, or when Stephanie specifically requested his presence for important events in the children's lives. The relationship between David and Stephanie was complicated and unstable, characterized by periods of reconciliation, followed by arguments about David's commitment to their family, and his failure to provide consistent emotional or financial support. Stephanie had repeatedly pressed David to either formalize their relationship through marriage or terminate their involvement entirely so she could move on with her life. David's decision to marry Jessica, while maintaining his relationship with Stephanie, reflected his inability to choose between the stability Jessica offered and his obligations to his children with Stephanie. He had convinced himself that he could manage both relationships separately, using his work travel as cover for maintaining contact with both women. The deception required careful coordination of his schedule, separate phone numbers for each relationship, and elaborate explanations for his whereabouts that satisfied both Jessica and Stephanie. David maintained different social media profiles and ensured that his 2 separate lives never intersected through mutual friends or professional contacts. David's wedding to Jessica created additional complexity in his relationship with Stephanie, who had not been informed about his marriage plans despite their ongoing intimate relationship and his continued involvement in their children's lives. Stephanie learned about David's marriage through social media posts from mutual acquaintances who had attended the ceremony. Stephanie's reaction to discovering David's marriage was initially shock, followed by anger about his deception and concern about the impact on Marcus and Isabella's relationship with their father. She immediately contacted David to demand explanations and to clarify how his marriage would affect his financial and emotional support for their children. David's response to Stephanie's confrontation was to minimize the significance of his marriage, claiming that his relationship with Jessica was primarily for financial convenience and professional networking purposes. He assured Stephanie that his feelings for her and his commitment to their children remained unchanged despite his legal marriage to another woman. However, Stephanie recognized that David's marriage represented a fundamental shift in their relationship dynamic and his availability for their family. She began pressing David to choose between his 2 families, threatening to pursue legal action for formal child support arrangements if he continued attempting to maintain both relationships. The crisis intensified when Stephanie informed David that she intended to contact Jessica directly to discuss their shared situation and David's obligations to his children. Stephanie's perspective was that honesty about the circumstances would be better for everyone involved, including Jessica, who deserved to know the truth about David's family situation. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. David's panic about Stephanie's threat to contact Jessica led him to make a critical error in judgment. On July 8, 2024, less than a month after his wedding, David decided to tell Jessica about Stephanie and the children himself, believing that controlling the narrative would minimize the damage to his marriage. David's revelation to Jessica occurred during what she had expected to be a routine evening at home. He explained that he had 2 children with a former girlfriend, but claimed that the relationship had ended before he met Jessica, and that he had been providing financial support without maintaining a romantic relationship with Stephanie. Jessica's initial reaction was shock and betrayal about David's failure to disclose such significant information during their courtship and engagement. The existence of 2 children represented major financial and emotional responsibilities that would fundamentally change their marriage and future plans. However, David's version of events was incomplete and misleading. He failed to mention that his relationship with Stephanie had continued throughout his relationship with Jessica, that he had been intimate with Stephanie as recently as 2 weeks before his wedding, and that Stephanie had been expecting him to eventually marry her rather than Jessica. Jessica's discovery of the full truth occurred when Stephanie, frustrated by David's continued deception, decided to contact Jessica directly, despite David's pleas to give him time to handle the situation. On July 15, 2024, Stephanie called Jessica at her office and requested a meeting to discuss their shared circumstances regarding David. The conversation between Jessica and Stephanie revealed the complete scope of David's deception. Stephanie provided evidence of her ongoing relationship with David, including recent photographs, text messages, and documentation of his visits to Lakeland that coincided with times when he had told Jessica he was traveling for work. Most devastatingly for Jessica, Stephanie revealed that David had promised to marry her once he achieved greater financial stability, and that he had been using his relationship with Jessica primarily for financial security, while maintaining his true emotional attachment to Stephanie and their children. Jessica's reaction to learning the full extent of David's betrayal was initially numbness, followed by rage toward both David and Stephanie. She viewed Stephanie as equally culpable for the deception, believing that Stephanie should have contacted her earlier to prevent the marriage from occurring under false pretenses. The meeting between Jessica and Stephanie, which took place at a coffee shop in Brandon on July 18, 2024, was intended by Stephanie to establish ground rules for sharing David's time and financial resources. However, Jessica's anger and sense of betrayal made productive communication impossible. Jessica's perspective was that her marriage had been invalidated by David's lies, and that Stephanie's continued involvement with David represented an ongoing threat to any possibility of repairing their relationship. She viewed Stephanie as an obstacle that needed to be eliminated rather than a fellow victim of David's deception. Following the meeting with Stephanie, Jessica began researching methods of eliminating what she perceived as the primary barrier to salvaging her marriage. Her internet search history, later recovered by digital forensic specialists, revealed queries about accidental deaths, untraceable poisons, and methods of staging incidents that would not attract criminal investigation. Jessica's planning became more systematic when she realized that Stephanie's death would eliminate David's financial obligations to his children and remove the ongoing reminder of his betrayal. With Stephanie gone, Jessica believed she could rebuild her marriage based on complete honesty and David's full commitment to their relationship. The murder occurred on August 3, 2024, when Jessica arranged to meet Stephanie ostensibly to discuss a more cooperative arrangement for sharing David's support and attention. Jessica suggested that they meet at Stephanie's home in Lakeland after the children were asleep so they could have a frank conversation without distractions. Jessica arrived at Stephanie's house at approximately 9:30 p.m., carrying what appeared to be a bottle of wine as a peace offering. However, Jessica had laced the wine with a significant quantity of antifreeze, specifically ethylene glycol, which she had researched as a poison that would cause symptoms resembling natural illness or heart problems. The two women spent nearly an hour discussing David's situation and potential solutions to their complicated circumstances. Stephanie consumed most of the poisoned wine while Jessica only pretended to drink, claiming she was taking antibiotics that prevented alcohol consumption. Within 2 hours of consuming the poisoned wine, Stephanie began experiencing severe nausea, dizziness, and confusion consistent with ethylene glycol poisoning. Jessica offered to help Stephanie get medical attention, but deliberately delayed calling emergency services until Stephanie's condition became critical. When emergency medical technicians arrived at Stephanie's home at 12:47 a.m. on August 4th, they found Stephanie unconscious and experiencing respiratory distress. Despite aggressive treatment efforts, Stephanie died at Lakeland Regional Medical Center at 3:22 a.m. without regaining consciousness. The initial medical assessment attributed Stephanie's death to a possible heart attack or stroke, conditions that would not be unusual for someone experiencing severe stress about relationship and custody issues. Jessica's presence at the scene was explained as a friend trying to help during a medical emergency. However, the investigation took a different direction when Marcus and Isabella Collins, Stephanie's children, were found to be alone in their bedrooms upstairs during the medical emergency. The children's presence raised questions about why Stephanie would have been drinking alcohol late at night when she was responsible for their care. Detective Lisa Rodriguez of the Polk County Sheriff's Office was assigned to investigate Stephanie's death, due to the unusual circumstances and the presence of an unknown individual at the scene. Detective Rodriguez's initial interview with Jessica revealed inconsistencies about the timeline of events and Jessica's knowledge of Stephanie's medical history. The investigation expanded when Detective Rodriguez learned about the complicated relationship between David, Jessica, and Stephanie, including the recent revelation of David's secret family and the tensions created by his attempted management of both relationships. Digital forensics analysis of Jessica's electronic devices revealed her extensive research into poisoning methods and her systematic planning of Stephanie's elimination. Browser history, deleted text messages, and online purchases provided investigators with comprehensive evidence of premeditation and criminal intent. Toxicology testing of Stephanie's blood and tissue samples confirmed the presence of ethylene glycol at levels consistent with fatal poisoning. The wine bottle recovered from Stephanie's home tested positive for antifreeze contamination, providing physical evidence linking Jessica to the murder. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more shocking true crime stories. Let us know in the comments what you think was Jessica's biggest mistake in planning this murder. Jessica Martinez was arrested on August 18, 2024, and charged with first-degree murder, child endangerment related to leaving Marcus and Isabella alone during their mother's death, and evidence tampering for her attempts to conceal the poisoning method. The arrest shocked Jessica's colleagues and friends, who had viewed her as a successful professional woman dealing with a difficult personal situation. The revelation that she had planned and executed Stephanie's murder contradicted their perceptions of her character and moral values. David Walsh's response to learning about Jessica's involvement in Stephanie's murder was reportedly devastation about losing both the mother of his children and his wife to the consequences of his own deception. He immediately contacted attorneys to seek custody of Marcus and Isabella while cooperating with the investigation into Stephanie's death. The case attracted significant media attention in the Tampa Bay area due to the suburban setting and the complex web of relationships that had led to murder. Legal analysts noted that the case demonstrated how personal betrayal and relationship triangles could escalate to deadly violence when individuals prioritize their own interests over rational problem-solving. Stephanie Collins' family members expressed outrage that their daughter had been murdered for trying to ensure that her children maintained a relationship with their father. They described Stephanie as a devoted mother who had struggled to provide stability for Marcus and Isabella despite David's inconsistent involvement in their lives. The preliminary court hearings revealed the extent of Jessica's planning and the calculating nature of her approach to eliminating Stephanie as a perceived obstacle to her marriage. Evidence included detailed research into poisoning methods, timing of the attack to coincide with the children's bedtime, and attempts to stage the scene as a natural death. Jessica's defense strategy focused on arguing that she had been a victim of David's deception and that her mental state had been compromised by the trauma of discovering her husband's double life. Defense attorneys claimed that Jessica's actions were the result of temporary insanity rather than calculated murder. However, the prosecution successfully demonstrated that Jessica had planned Stephanie's murder systematically over several weeks, researching methods, purchasing materials, and coordinating the timing to maximize her chances of avoiding detection. The evidence contradicted claims about impulsive behavior or compromised judgment. Expert witnesses testified about the effects of ethylene glycol poisoning and the likelihood that Stephanie would have suffered significantly before losing consciousness. Medical testimony established that Jessica's choice of poison demonstrated intent to cause a painful death, rather than a quick, merciful elimination. The jury deliberated for 18 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Jessica was sentenced to life imprisonment, without possibility of parole for the first-degree murder conviction, plus additional consecutive sentences for the child endangerment and evidence tampering charges. Marcus and Isabella Collins were placed in the temporary custody of Stephanie's parents, while David Walsh pursued legal proceedings to establish his paternal rights and secure permanent custody. The children required extensive counseling to process the trauma of losing their mother and the disruption to their family stability. David Walsh faced civil lawsuits from Stephanie's family, alleging that his deception and manipulation had created the circumstances that led to her murder. While not criminally responsible for Jessica's actions, David was held financially liable for the consequences of his dishonesty. The townhouse Jessica and David had shared was sold to pay legal expenses and restitution to Stephanie's children. Jessica's assets were also liquidated to establish trust funds for Marcus and Isabella's future education and counseling expenses. Jessica Martinez is currently serving her sentence at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida. She has participated in mental health counseling, but has maintained that her actions were justified by David's betrayal and Stephanie's role in the deception. The case prompted discussions about the importance of honesty in relationships and the dangers of attempting to maintain multiple families secretly. Victim advocates used Stephanie's story to highlight the risks faced by single mothers who become involved with men who are unwilling to commit fully to their responsibilities. Marcus and Isabella Collins have remained in the custody of their maternal grandparents and have adapted well to their new living arrangement. David Walsh has been granted supervised visitation rights but continues to face restrictions based on his history of deception and the role his dishonesty played in their mother's death. The case remains a significant example of how personal betrayal and relationship deception can escalate to deadly violence when individuals refuse to accept responsibility for their actions and instead seek to eliminate the consequences of their choices through criminal behavior.